So it's been quite the unraveling, crazy journey these last 13 months, 14 months, while being tripped out on full-on cPTSD, learning and being diagnosed with borderline personality, being diagnosed on the spectrum for both autism and ADHD, and reading heavily into INFJ and INFP because I can test out both, and I get both wings 50-50 as well, the A and T. And then also on top of that cPTSD was PISD, which is post-infidelity stress disorder. I want to say something right now is somebody out there has termed this already. I like that they're starting to drop the disorder and they're replacing the D with an I, which is injury. So we can rephrase all this. Borderline personality injury, complex post-traumatic stress injury, post-infidelity stress injury, attention deficit hyper injury. Because these are all, well, there's some genetics to a couple of these things. A lot of it is actually shaped by your childhood and your upbringing and your life experiences. So getting hit with all of this truth while I was completely gone on the stress injuries for about 8 months. I then spent 5 months four and a half, 5 months completely heartbroken and severely depressed. Basically didn't leave my house for 4.5 months. And I was lucky if I would shower once a week. Or cook. I still haven't cooked in coming up on 6 months now. But that's all changing. This is what 6 months of stress and depression does to a person. About 13 months ago, I started shedding weight. I lost about 50 to 60 pounds total. I've maybe put 1 pound back on because I started eating again about a month ago. So it's all tough to take on, and there's so much happening inside this autistic INFJ head. There's a lot of interlacing going on between all these things as well. I want to speak to that. So let's get to it. Basically, between the ages of 1 and 10, I got cPTSD and ADHD. From all the fear of neglect, the fear of abandonment, of rejection, of not feeling good enough, of feeling responsible for my parents divorcing, being sexually abused between being 5 and 10 multiple times by family or caretakers. So I used to bite my nails off, like to the marrow, basically. I would always be biting my nails. I was always tapping, fidgeting, getting in shit, getting in trouble, being hyperactive, being a nightmare for my babysitters, getting in trouble at school for being the loud kid, the clown kid, all this. And back then I was pretty mistreated by the teachers on the way they resolved my flamboyant nature, let's say, or rebellious spirit. I once got beaten for going to get a glue stick while the rest of the class was told to use white glue because I thought the glue stick would be a better option. Yes, I got beaten for that by my teacher. Thrown out into the hall for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Anyhow, throughout my teenage years, I circled with every group. It was I could roll with the jocks, the preps, the skids, the nerds, the browners, the normal people, everybody. I was a chameleon. And that goes right into borderline. So in my teens, I was starting to develop my borderline. They say you should have it by early adulthood. There should be a lot of symptoms there. You should be able to be diagnosed. Well, I met all those criteria, no problem when I got diagnosed. So even to this day, 45 years old, I really don't have an identity. And that's a major issue for borderliners and also on the INFJs. Because we are, by default, people pleasers and chameleons. And for me, I've moved 104 times in my life. I've lived in Spain and in Canada, in 2 different provinces, different towns within those provinces, and different towns in Spain as well. Often I would go to Spain for the summer, miss out on all the tournaments and stuff for lacrosse. I was a very good lacrosse player, and I would come home and lose some friends. And there was a year I went there in grade 10, and when I came back to Canada, I made friends with all the younger siblings of who used to be my friends. It was kind of messed up. So throughout my life, I've really not retained any particular best friend, if you will, that I know I can call at 3 a.m. or right now at 1 o'clock in the afternoon to get advice or lean into or cry with. I don't have those people. So what I've done is I've poured everything that I am into my romantic partnerships and kind of made them my everything and all, which is it's toxic. Anyhow, so we have this lack of identity and people pleasing within the INFJ and the borderliner. We have this intense fear of abandonment. As a borderliner, it's just default whether you've been abandoned or not, and in the INFJ. And then if you've got cPTSD or PISD, so if you've been neglected, abandoned, rejected as a child by your parents or caretakers, and then later in life you are abandoned, rejected, cheated on, and betrayed by your significant other, your abandonment issues and your trust issues mine are nuclear, and I've worked really, really hard on them for over a decade. In fact, even longer. And what those deep trust issues can do with all these injuries, because they are injuries, it's brain, heart, and soul. I have scars on my body that I forget about all the time. I forgot about that physical injury. I've got a problem with my knuckle here from work years and years and years ago. I often forget about it until it, annoys me while I'm trying to finger pick on my guitar or something. The physical, I would rather take a shotgun blast to the chest than to discover that my partner's cheating on me. I speak from experience. Or losing love and stringing me along, whatever. So these are injuries, and an injured person, what they're going to do is they're going to be very mindful and look out for the next possible injury. If they see that pattern, so as an autist, as an INFJ, and as a survivor of these 3 stress disorders, borderline, PISD, and cPTSD, I'm extremely hypervigilant, extremely hyper aware. I memorize rooms I walk into that I've never been into, and I can envision them later perfectly. I can let somebody know where the pen was, even if it was a friend of a friend, and it's borderline psychic, intuition, and memory. So when you know something, not just intuition, but you actually know the truth, and you give that person the chance to tell you the truth, and you ask them a question, and they lie to you, that's devastating, because you know the answer. And so that's happened to me many, many times. But I've also lied in my past as well. Chronic traumatic injury persons get adept at lying to survive. to get by. So we become really good liars, but we also are extremely good lie detectors. So when you have this fear of abandonment, this people-pleasing, this need to know, this hyper-arousal, hyperactivity in the brain to protect oneself from future injury, it can come off as very scary, because we might, if we're suffering from the injury, if we're in a state, because it is legitimately a state that will change your brain composition, your brain plasticity, the way your neurons fire, because you're in a trauma response. And there's 4 trauma responses: fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. And I've done them all, sometimes multiple at the exact same time. I've done some what looks like scary stuff because I couldn't ask the person directly to validate something or reassure me about something. I had the pattern in the back of my head from previous experiences, and I needed to know because the anxiety was just blowing my brains up, consuming me. So I had to do things to find answers for myself that came off as very scary, and honestly, they were scary. But this is the lengths that somebody might go to soothe and to find peace, to get that reassurance, that validation, that knowledge. You're literally at war with yourself. You're torn up inside. You're tearing yourself apart as you're doing these things, whether it's fact finding, information finding, actual like stalking, spying, going through somebody's device, you name it. There's these things that a desperate person will do to protect their sanity, their heart, and the illusion they have of their present, to protect a future, that fantasy future that we have going on. So the autist in me is extremely gifted. I recently tested in the past month, and the last time I tested, my IQ was probably grade 6 or 7. Way back then, I scored like 148 or so. I've just gotten a 164 recently. I'm really good with numbers and logic and patterns, and that all plays into my traumatic injuries and self-protection. But the autist in me is like that. The ADHD in me hyperfixates on something. The INFJ in me is always super curious and needs to know, needs to research, right? So these 3 things combine into like this super sleuth, fact finder, often knowing, or being channeled in the appropriate channels on groups or on apps or whatever. Like I was on Telegram through COVID, getting the real information from the inventors of the PCRA test or the mRNA technology, and trying to warn my friends and family who all made their own choices, no matter what I said. So those 3 aspects really combine into, like I said, the super sleuth. And then you have the injury triplet for me, which is the BPD, cPTSD, and the PISD. And they all combine, again, as a super sleuth, but this is from a place of injury, not curiosity or fact-finding. So we have these 2 forces. One is to find the absolute truth. The other is to find the absolute truth for self-protection or protection of a relationship, for perseverance in that regard. So when all these things fired up for me last year, I became this desperate, constant, anxietal mess. I was literally half and half at war with myself of this is what I should do or shouldn't do, and then the other shoulder guy no, you need to do this or you're not going to sleep tonight. You're already not eating. You need to find out for yourself. We've got a really strong list here of patterns that we can identify and recognize, and you should probably act on that to get peace of mind so that we can all sleep tonight in the same head. People with any of these injuries or diagnoses are often, what do I want to say? We're often incapable of resting unless we can prove the pattern or disprove the pattern. If we can prove the truth or disprove the truth. Because we get hyperfixated on knowing, on the need to know. And often any of these injuries or diagnostic people are anxious attachers, or fearful, or, to be honest, disorganized, because we can go either way. I've avoided and I've been anxiety in attachment in relationships, whether we're friends or partners or even family. Dissociation is a big one, and that's exactly how to describe the mess I was in last year. And even through COVID, as I started to dissociate, I didn't realize what I was doing because I didn't have these answers. So maybe through COVID, I decided to pick up an old video game I used to play way back in the day when I was traumatized and dissociating, but didn't even know. I was drinking a lot, so that's what BPDers will do, and anybody with a stress injury will try to self-soothe through self-harm, through validation via sex, drugs, alcohol, smoking, binging on anything, to soothe ourselves. And that's exactly what was going on. Last year I tried quitting drinking for a few months, off and on, while I was trying to deal with this internal war. I was trying to save a relationship, and all this stuff was going on. I was a changed person, and while I fully meant every word I said about wanting to get better and not being this way and not needing so much reassurance for the first time in the relationship, or even having the trust issues pop up, I got stuck, and I couldn't change my brain. It had already changed, and it was just firing off on emergency mode nonstop, 24 hours a day. It's like, imagine you have a deathly fear of snakes. Like, you're on a walk with your friend on a trail and you see a little baby garter snake, you jump 30 feet that way and you scream and you're sweating and you're panicking and, oh my God, you're about to die. Well, that's what it's like for us when we have something that we are recognizing, that we're picking up on with our intuition or via other means, like maybe there's actual evidence or something actually happened that was akin to that traumatic injury from the past that is just a pattern. It's as if we've just been thrown into a room full of snakes. And the person who threw us in that room is our closest person, our favorite person, if you will. And then, if that's not enough to throw us into this room full of snakes, venomous, anacondas, everything, they turn the light switch off and tell us to find the way out. And that's kind of how I felt for the greater part of last year. And spending 5 months alone, like literally alone for the first time in my life, which is probably healthy at my age, and which is a fear for INFJs, it's a fear for BPDs, it's a fear for persons like myself, highly sensitive, empathetic people who are built for connection, like any human. I've always had people to go to. This time I didn't, and that's why I call it the dark night of the soul. And the universe kind of aligned and dropped all this on me after this experience that had happened, to let it get out of my body, which I still am working on, to get it out of my mind, which has been a struggle, and to fill my heart with my own love, which has been lacking for a long time, and to not self-harm throughout the process, which I'm getting way better at. Pretty proud of myself. But anyhow, in those 5-6 months, I diagnosed and researched the living bejesus out of these things. I've spent anywhere from 10 to 16 hours a day on podcasts, on conferences, on reading books, reading in groups and helping in groups for all these different things. I am a certified NLP life coach, neuro-linguistic programming, and it's funny how when we're in the middle of a crisis of our own, you can't teach yourself NLP in that moment. Like I said in my previous videos, you might know all these tools and have all these toolboxes full of tools for dealing with anxiety, panic, and all these stress responses, but in the moment of absolute terror, paranoia, crisis, dissociation, you don't even know what a tool looks like. All you know is the fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. Those are primitive things that are built into us. And man, I look back at how many ways my ADHD was active, how many ways my borderline became active, all the snide remarks, comments, retribution, or vengeance, all the desperate attempts to prevent abandonment, to prevent rejection, to find love, or to be reassured in it when it seemed like it was going away. I can see how the cPTSD was active underneath it all from the time I was 3 years old. I already had a bunch of traumatic events between being 2 and 4. And then for it to blossom out over my lifespan to land now, way midlife. In the last year, I think I've aged about 15 years. People used to say I look 38. Now they'd say I look 59. It's crazy the toll all this stuff can take on the body. That's the physical expression of the internal injury from all these things. So, I think the hardest one for anybody without borderline or post-traumatic injury, and having all these crazy things happen to them, they really don't understand what dissociation is. It took me a long time to realize how I dissociated in my past. I definitely remember how I dissociated in the last year. It's like an alter ego. There's like a scale on dissociation. So maybe it's zoned out playing a video game. If somebody says something to you, you literally have to go, huh? And have them repeat it. You might have to have them repeat it another time. And then there's the stronger dissociation, which leads you to want to self-harm via drugs or alcohol, so that you can escape and mask the internal battle or the internal pain, or just change your state because you're not happy where you are. And then there's the higher echelon of dissociation, where something's triggered you. It could be something really simple and invisible to anybody else, but to you it's something massive that can literally, in the blink of an eye, maybe half a blink, take you from 0 to 100 into they call it in INFJs, go Jekyll and Hyde. INFJ has a rage that is suppressed, but once you pull that little tiny hairpin out, boom, nuclear. Borderline, nuclear. A traumatic stress injury survivor, depending on what it is, if it's something that's happened to them before, nuclear. So all these things to just go nuclear with. Also being a highly emotional, people-pleasing, compassionate, amazing, caring person. So you really have to cross a lot of lines to cause this type of person to detonate. And I can tell you that it's happened to me. I remember the big one. The next day I was completely hungover. Didn't know what happened. It took me hours to piece together the memories I had. And here's where all of these things have in common is shame. Toxic shame, toxic guilt, shame. I did that. I said that. I hurt this person. This person's not even here right now. And trying to stitch it all together and then coming up with, I need to fix this. I didn't mean to do that. I never had any of these thoughts leading up to it. But now here we are, and I love this person, and I need to figure out how to get them back. And I have to come up with a convincing story. So here's my 20,000 page apology. Here's all the reasons I think I did this. No, you did not deserve it. I am so fucking sorry. Please believe me. I love you so much. And anybody on the outside will just say, oh, he's a drunk and he can't hold his shit together. He's a narcissist. Nobody deserves to be treated like that. And they're right. Nobody deserves to be treated like that. Definitely not proud of my few outbursts. And definitely not proud of how my trust issues came up in my last relationship, which were completely unfair and unwarranted. I remember the first few times just being like, oh my God, like, why does this keep happening? I do trust you. I have no problem. I have no reason to not. Literally had no reason to not trust. But my previous partners, my parents, old relationships, friends, it always ended the same. That pattern, right? That tipping point. So I think shame is the underlying core wound for a lot of these things. Because as a kid, like I said, I did the cliche classic thing of taking on my parents' dysfunction, of taking on my parents divorcing, on taking on that I was the reason that I had to leave all my friends in the summertime when my birthday was, during my sports season, one of them, to go to a completely different country, to a parent that I didn't trust, ultimately, and then come back home to a parent that I didn't trust fully. And that's how I grew up. And that's why at an early age I started self-harming. I used to cut my arms. I've pierced all my own piercings. I pierced my own tongue, for fuck's sakes, in my bathroom. I have a really high pain tolerance threshold now because of all these traumatic injuries. And I really don't think twice about when I get hurt externally or of my body. It's the brain and heart that I really strive to protect. So toxic shame and toxic guilt, going through my teens and rebelling and smoking and drinking and, doing mushrooms and acid at a young age and running with the bad crowd. I'm not going to say what, but I did some bad stuff. Like, if I was an adult and I got caught doing some of those things, definitely would have been in jail. Things I wasn't proud of, and I haven't really told anybody in my life about. I was a great actor from a very young age, and that's borderliner right there. Borderliners make amazing actors and actresses, and there's a lot of famous, some of your favorite actors and actresses have BPD. I would say the majority of my life, I have been a quiet, high-functioning borderliner. I've been a very high function with my cPTSD. These things have only ever really expressed themselves as reaction to I sensed as injustice, humiliation, unfairness, or straight up abandonment, betrayal, or rejection. And that's my big three of the stress injuries and borderlining and INFJ. It's they all have this amazing release of rage. But I never really raged out. I just did dumb things, said mean things, but not in an episode, like not in an altar, just being young and dumb. Up until I found who I thought was my person for life. And sensing betrayal or abandonment, or just having some weird synchronicities with patterns from a previous relationship. I haven't had that many relationships, they've all been long term, but they were same countries, same names, same things going on, these patterns. When something really sensitive happened, I exploded and over apologized, became anxious in the attachment because of that desperation to prevent abandonment, the people pleasing, the pouring until your cup is empty, and I started suffocating my person. And as much as I didn't want to, and I was told, hey, let's just take it easy, you're good, you don't have to live in the past, give yourself grace and compassion like you do for everybody else. That's our problem, is we can't. I'll forgive somebody that stabs me tomorrow, maybe in a couple of days. But if I do something to somebody else, it never leaves me. It makes me feel horrible, like a failure. And so when we screw up and we keep living our lives, we keep screwing up, we make mistakes, we make mistakes, we make mistakes. If we're not actively healing that in ourselves, we just end up with this massive shame inside of us. It has to come out somehow. And sometimes we project it out of fears. And what I was going to say was that often people can't sense or see that we're in the middle of a dissociative episode, that we need some alone space, that underneath the surface of our skin is a torrent of lava just ready to burst forth and consume everything in our path. Having all this information for myself, I can now go back in time and go, oh man, now I know exactly how I was feeling, what my thought processes were like, what I was doing, how I felt just before I detonated. So now I can prevent that using DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, and EMDR, There's a great book on EMDR, by the way. It's the best. Okay, so it's eye movement to help get through the cPTSD and PISD. So we can use these tools for mindfulness and to help us shift, and it's just great tools for the toolbox. I think once you have a diagnosis, or you have multiple, and you can put all these pieces together, it's an immense amount of relief, but at the same time, it's like an all-consuming grief as well, because you just feel like, damn, I could have saved that, I could have saved this, I could have kept this, I would be over here by now. And so that's shame talking and guilt talking. But all we can do is just take what we know right now, today, okay, and slap band-aids on and treat and use triage to work down to the cores, to get rid of the shame and the guilt, and learn to live with the fact that we're very reactive people, to learn to respond more. If we want to say no to anything, to say no. And if that means letting somebody down, then if you're better off saying no to prevent that no from coming out later, then just say no now. And only say yes to the things you truly want to do, be a part of, be with. That's it. I remember hating myself, as I did cocaine. I hated myself as I grabbed another drink. I hated myself as I lit another cigarette. I hated myself as I drove to a person's neighborhood to get verification for my validation. We can do a lot of crappy things in the name of just preserving our sanity, I guess. But it's often that we're doing these things in a completely different state of sanity. And that's scary to think about, that we can become this beast. Beauty and the Beast, literally, was my last relationship. And man, she went through more than I think anybody should or would have. And that breaks my heart completely. It's still broken. INFJs are called Dr. Jekyll and Dr. Hyde. And a borderliner and a betrayal, abandonment, infidelity, stress survivor, we can be Jekyll and Hyde. And the thing with all of these things is it can take weeks to months, sometimes years, to heal all the parts of us that are activated, all the memories, the body memories, and flashbacks, the nightmares, the sleep patterns. There's so much to it. You can't expect anybody that is acting out of any post-traumatic stress to heal right away. All they need is love, reassurance to the ability you're able to give it, and love, lots of it. We didn't ask for this stuff, but and this stuff isn't what makes us stronger. What makes us stronger is having to heal it, because we're healing a terrible gift that keeps on giving, that somebody who made very piss poor choices in the past did to us. Whether that was completely destroying our faith and love, destroying our illusions of the future, or of what we meant to somebody, our self-worth, our self-esteem, our sexual potency, our very nature. These kinds of injuries make a person crumble from the inside. They completely undo you as a human. And for me, with borderline and the fact that I'm already lacking a set self-identity, because I've got, like I said, 600 different hobbies I've done in my life. I've worked in 35 different careers. I've lived in 104 different addresses in different provinces and countries. I have no set group. I don't have my own house. Yes, I do all sorts of creative stuff, but I'm never doing it anymore. So, a few years ago when I felt I was finally establishing myself somewhere, building a routine, and for that to be uprooted, and then in the middle of COVID, where I'm picking up as an empath on everybody in the world's panic and fear, all of my employees, because I was running a company or managing one for a friend, all the stress at the job sites, the stress my employees were under. They'd all come to me with their problems. My partner was calling me with anxiety and panic attacks. I had nowhere to dump my stuff or ground it out because I'd lost the place I was living at that brought me immense joy and grounding on the water. And when I tried to talk to my partner, or who I considered my best friend at the time, the only two people in my life outside of work that I saw all the time and could talk about anything with, they didn't want to hear it. They would never let me get a few words in on what I'd read or studied from the developer of mRNA, the inventor of the PCR test, what the WHO is doing, all this stuff that was going on. And even what was happening politically. I never really cared about politics until 2019, 2020, I would say 2020. I'm going to tell you something right now. You're in for a ride. And when it goes down, I'll be right here. That's my autism and my INFJ, and pattern recognitionist, human lie detector, psychic intuition. So I wasn't able to vent out my stuff, whereas everybody was venting their stuff to me. That's a hard place to be, because we all need somebody. Hell, just last year, in the midst of my crisis, I started seeing a therapist, and I thought it was looking really good for saving the relationship too, but then she dumped me. My therapist dumped me. After saying, yep, you've got cPTSD, you're absolutely on the borderline spectrum for sure, we're going to do more testing, we'll start the DBT, we'll get into EMDR and this and that. I emailed her at least a dozen times throughout July and August, and even a few months ago, and then a month ago, and I've just given up. I don't even have a doctor. There's a massive shortage in Canada for family doctors. I don't know where to get any psychotherapy right now, but I'm looking into it and just really sticking with all the groups and Zoom calls and stuff like that where I can get it. And that's helped a ton, but you know how different it all is for peace of mind and stuff. So in typical disorganized fashion, this really bothers my INFJ autist, because I'm just kind of freewheeling all this, and I said there'd be shorter videos. I will try to do that. I just felt like speaking and sharing, and maybe people out there are resonating with me, and maybe this helps somebody out. I think the big key to getting back into some semblance of normalcy and feeling as close as I could get to how I felt 4 years ago when I felt the happiest in my life is reconnecting with my spirituality, reconnecting with God, reconnecting with Source, the universe, pick your descriptive name. But just coming back to self and realizing I am, and that everything around me is connected to me. Every person in the world is connected to me, and I'm connected to you. Really meditating on that. Get your 432 hertz, your 528 hertz for nighttime. Ask source for help. Say thank you as many times as a day, and express gratitude. Exercise with gratitude as often as you can all day long. Get out there, go for at least a half an hour walk. An hour is better. You know, do psychosomatic, creative things that you can. I know it's hard some days, trust me. Like I said, I was rotting on my couch for a week and a half without showering. It's pretty disgusting. I was driving, to work, so nobody had to smell me, but it got pretty gross. And it's pretty sad. But that's the effects that these things can have on us if we don't know how to deal with them. So I think from now on, I'm going to really focus on content for these videos. I know I'm upwards of like almost 50 minutes here, almost an hour's worth of me yabbering away on nothing in particular. But moving forward, I think I'm going to break down my entire life story and give you like little 5-year chunks at a time where I can. And definitely going to be sharing a lot of resources for you, either in the chat it'll be linked, or my bio, or I'll put it on the screen. I'll figure out how to do all this stuff. In order to help whoever I can. And this is extremely cathartic for myself. It's very healing for me. This is me now not being scared of what anybody thinks of me, whether it's my parents, God bless my mom, she's not here, or friends or partners or whatever. I don't have anybody right now. I've got a few family members I know I can rely on. I have nothing to prove to anybody. I'm at a weird spot in my life where it's not really going down and it's not really going up, and I'm kind of nowhere in the middle anyways, from just the course of how everything's played out. I've got a bunch of junk I need to get rid of, things I don't need or use. And it's time for version 8.9, so this is part of my new version. Yeah. It's pretty crazy what we've survived. What I wouldn't wish on anybody is most of the stuff I've gone through. I was calling the crisis lines so much in the last year, especially in the last months, where I basically got to know the call takers, which made it kind of awkward for me, because now it's not some uninvolved third party that doesn't know me. One of them, or a few of them, have said, well, you got like 7 and 9 things on the go here that just one of those would be enough for somebody to be calling us about suicide attempt. And yeah, I have ideated, I have thought, I know the best way, all that stuff. Am I gonna do it? No. Do I think about it? Yeah. It's a natural human thought. Don't be ashamed of yourself. Just don't do it. But one of the call takers, he was really compassionate, and he said, "Man, what's left for you now? You got to rise from the ashes." And he told me about the book, The Legend of the Phoenix. He says, "All you've got now is being Phoenix," and that was really inspiring to hear. And And trust me, I know the lore of the Phoenix. I'm a Harry Potter fan. I play Dungeons and Dragons my entire life. Like, sometimes it takes just an outside person or somebody even close to you to give you that support that you need, to help you hold your wings as they dry off, as it were, or reform, to give you that safety while your feathers grow back. That can change a person immensely and for the better, and inspire them and make them feel loved. Because at the end of the day, what all of these injuries have in common was there was a massive lack of love at some point, or we felt unworthy of love, or we were made to feel completely unloved from the very people that held our hearts in their hands, and they chose to do what they would with that power. And I don't think there's a smaller feeling than feeling crushed by the people you love the most. And it's not my fault, and it's not your fault, and it's not their fault, because they didn't really know what they were doing, did they? But we can end the cycle, we can end the patterns, we can make a great life for ourselves. We don't have to live our lives defined by all these labels. Life is worth living. It's an adventure. It's this amazing matrix holographic simulation that we get one conscious memory for. And I believe in spiritual elevation and 3D, 4D, 5D up to the 7th dimension. And I want to get to 7 this time around. So maybe that's how we need to start viewing it, is we're given the hard road, the road that goes through the swamp, through the dark forest, through Mordor, for a reason. I think we are the strongest, most resilient, most loving people there are. And inside, you know that. It's not your fault if somebody else doesn't know what to do with that. And it's definitely not their fault to not know how to handle you when you're off the handle. That's the hardest one, is letting go of somebody you never wanted to let go of. But that's a for now thing, right? Anyhow. Okay, we're coming on an hour here. Thanks for listening to the babble. Like, share, comment, subscribe, whatever it is you'd like to do. I'm not here for money, but just to help. And thanks for hearing me out. Anyways, Blacksmith, fellow forger. Until later.